Have you ever wanted to be able to restrict users from being able to upload files to generative AI websites? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to do that. Hello, in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can use Endpoint DLP within Microsoft Purview to prevent your users from being able to upload files to generative AI websites such as ChatGPT or Gemini, as well as others. So first of all, let's start in the Purview portal. So we need to browse to purview.microsoft.com. And the first thing that we want to look at is the settings option, which is available on the left-hand side. And then we want to select the data loss prevention option from the solution settings. Now, once we've opened this, we want to make sure Endpoint DLP settings is selected. And then we want to just browse down to where we see the option for browser and domain restrictions to sensitive data. So you can see the first option that we have available here is unallowed browsers. So what we want to make sure that we're doing here is we're adding in any browsers that have not been determined as allowed within the organization. Personally, my advice here is to encourage your users to use Microsoft Edge and then add all other browsers into this list, as Microsoft Edge natively supports Endpoint DLP policies. You can extend this to Google Chrome, but you'll require the Purview extension. However, I've just found personally that encouraging people to use Microsoft Edge is a lot easier to be able to get this working. But as I said, please make sure that you add in any of the browsers that you do not allow within your organization to this list, to make sure that if people are trying to upload files to those browsers, the actions will be prevented. Now, if we scroll down, we've also got this service domains option here, and you'll notice to the left-hand side of that, we've got a block or allow option. So essentially what this list is, it's a global list that will apply to all Endpoint DLP policies that you select the option for upload within that policy. This list will be assessed as that policy is being evaluated on the endpoints. Now, what you can do is you can either have a list of service domains that you choose to allow, and that will mean that every other domain is blocked. So that can be quite a hard line that you take if that approach. The other option is to block service domains that specifically you don't want. So if you are using only Microsoft 365, for example, you might choose to block Google Workspace here, for example, or in this demo that we're talking about, it might be ChatGPT, for example, if you're looking at those generative AI sites. So you can add that list within here, but it's worth noting that's global. Below there, we've got this sensitive service domain groups. This is what can be selected to, well, we can select particular groups that we want to be added into policy, so it's a bit more granular. So for example, obviously we've got one example here of generative AI sites, but potentially we could have a site here that was social media, for example, and we could prevent people from being able to upload content to there from their endpoint. So that's something to consider here, and you can target that to different people, whereas within the policy, you can target these to different policies, whereas this one, if you're blocking upload, it's going to look for anything that's within that list. Now, we can see here we've got this generative AI websites service domain group, which I'm going to select for this policy in this example. So if we expand the option here, it's going to show us a list of the domains that are listed in there as the generative AI sites. So what we can see is if we just go to the list here, we can see it's quite an extensive list. Obviously, I'm sure there may be some that are missing from here, but this has got a lot of the big names within there. So this is a fairly comprehensive list. One thing that I will point out is that Microsoft 365 Copilot is included in this. So it's worth noting that if you are looking to use that internally, you may need to create your own list that excludes that from it. Unfortunately, there's not an option to edit that list. So there's no way to be able to take ones in and out of that. So if you are looking to specifically block or allow certain AI sites, you'll need to just make sure that you create your own one and import them as necessary. So now we've talked about those kind of options, what we also want to do is look at the policies that we want to create. So I'm going to go to data loss prevention on the left hand side here, and we're going to go to policies. And what I'm going to do, I've prepared some earlier, but I'm just going to walk you through how we actually want to create these. So I'm going to select data store connected in connected sources. I'm going to select custom and custom policy and click next. I'm going to put into here block AI upload. For admin units, I'm going to select full directory, but if you're using admin units within your organization and you'd like to scope the policy to select admin units, feel free to go ahead and do that. I'm then going to select from here devices only, because that's the only one that I want this to apply to in this context. And we can see that we can edit this. So I recommend, as you're testing this, that you specify specific users and devices that you want to apply this to. For this example, I'm just going to select all. I'll select next, and I'll select next again. And now we're going to create our rules. And I'm actually going to create two rules. One is going to be looking at files that contain sensitivity labels that we'd like to block from being uploaded. And the other is going to be looking at specific file types, specifically looking at their extensions. Now, I'm going to create both the rules within this policy. However, the intention here is that you would take away which one most applies to your organization. So if your organization is already using sensitivity labels, that might be the better option for you. If you're not yet, or you just want to block all files, the extension option might be better. So let's look at the sensitivity label one for now. Let's paste that into there, and we are going to select under the conditions content contains, and we're going to select sensitivity labels. I'm going to select all of the sensitivity labels so that we can essentially what we're doing here is we're saying that if something has a label, we want it to be essentially be subject to this data loss prevention rule. That's what we're looking for. We're going to go to the actions options, and then we're going to select this audit or restrict activities on devices. Now, by default, you get a lot of options that are kind of ticked. We want to untick everything here. The only one that we want ticked is this upload to a restricted cloud service domain or access from an unallowed browsers. Now, I'm going to set this to block. However, I recommend, as you're testing with this, set it in audit only mode, check what you're going to be able to do. You can then liaise with the users that are potentially using it in a manner that you don't necessarily want them to understand why are they doing that. Is there any business changes that we can make to make that solution available to them in a more secure and compliant manner? And then later you can look to block that or do block with override. I'm going to select block for this option. However, I will for another one provide an override option. So I am going to then select from here, choose different restrictions for service domains. So within here, I want to make sure that I'm selecting this generative AI websites option. So I'm going to click add, and again, we can select a different option for this. So where we talked about that service domains list, we can actually select a different action for the service domains groups. However, in this one, I actually want it to be block as well. So we are going to select that for that one. And what I'm going to do is I am going to just scroll down. In this case, we don't need any notifications. We don't need to provide any override options. I'm not going to enable alerts. However, I do recommend if you want to be able to investigate and review kind of when these rules are triggered, then I recommend turning that on and sending it to the relevant administrators within your tenant. I'm going to turn it off for now and click save. Now I'll create the second one here, which we will call file extension block AI upload. And from the conditions list, now what we're going to select is this file extension is. And here we can see that what this essentially is going to allow us to do is specify the file extensions that we want to block. So I'm going to put in some common examples here. These are kind of Office files as well as PDF. However, we can extend this to say an image file. So a PNG, JPG, JPEG, we've got the options to kind of extend this a little bit further. Now, the one thing that I will add here from my own testing, I have noticed that some extensions do not work as well as others. One example here is I was testing to see if I could block an exe file using this method, and unfortunately it wouldn't work in that context. Even though it was specified within here, I was still able to do that. So make sure if you are deploying this within your organization that you test this to make sure that any of the extensions that you specify here will work. I'm going to, for the actions, again, select that audit or restrict activities on devices, untick the relevant pieces, and make sure that we have the upload to a restricted cloud service domain selected. We're going to set that to block with override this time, and then I'm then going to select the generative AI websites option again. and I'm going to select that to block with override again as well. So in this scenario, what that's going to mean is that the user is going to be able to actually override the policy if they want to. And what we are going to do, we're just going to collapse that section. And what we can do is we can require a business justification to override as well, which I recommend doing. This all gets added into the auditing so that you've got visibility of why that person was doing that. And again, I'll quickly turn off the alerts for this, just as they're not required for demo purposes. I'll click save. That's our two rules created. So we've got the one that is for sensitivity labels. So we're going to block any file that has a sensitivity label applied from being uploaded to one of those generative AI sites. And then for those file extensions, we are going to do the same for the generative AI sites, but we're going to allow the user to override as well. I'm going to click next on that. I am going to turn the policy on immediately. Again, make sure that if you are doing this in a production environment, that you potentially run it in simulation mode, or at least scope it to less users before you turn it on, and really upset a lot of people within your organization. I'll click next to turn that on, and we'll submit that. And what we will do is we'll allow that to apply to the tenant, and then I'll show you how that actually looks for the end users. Okay, let's first look at an example of uploading a file that's got a sensitivity label. So I'm going to browse to the files on here, and I'm going to select one that I know for a fact has one. So this confidential, anyone unrestricted, is a file that has a sensitivity label applied to it. And as we can see, that we get the message that that has been blocked. Now, if we look at how this looks for another file that doesn't have a sensitivity label, but is one of the file types that we included, so let's select this one here. I know that this does not have a sensitivity label applied. We can see in this scenario, we're getting the justification that's required here to override the block that's been in place. So from here, we can select some of the pre-built options. There is a capability to customize these as well. And for now, I'm just going to select this option here, and then I'm going to click override. And as we can see, that's now allowed me to add the file. So this was just a very quick example of how you can block files from being uploaded to generative AI websites. Obviously in this example, I've shown ChatGPT, but this would apply to others. Obviously, this is quite a hard line when you're coming to doing this, so please take that into consideration and maybe consider doing this in an audit-only mode so that you can understand the use cases across your organization and then better implement this with a more refined approach. I hope this video was useful. If you did find it useful, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.